Welcome, gather round the fireside and listen to a tale of Fionn McCool, Cuchulainn, Deirdre of the Sorrows, Gráinne wail. From giants right down to fairies, of both the trooping and solitary, and those who are sometimes scary. Anything goes by the fireside. Yeah. Fireside, the Puka fireside, the Marrow fireside. Kings and queens fighting heroes, don't you run from the fun, there's no need to hide. Sit by the fireside. Fireside. Yeehaw. Hello and welcome to Fireside, the Irish storytelling podcast. Each episode of Fireside we take a story from folklore or mythology, retell it, have a chat about the tale itself and about the craft, the culture and the history of storytelling. My name is Kevin C. O'Lahan. I am your host and your Fireside Bard. Welcome to episode number 44 of Fireside, the Irish storytelling podcast. We are coming to you as always from the beautiful surroundings of the Head Stuff Podcast Network studio here in Dublin. It is a brand new year. Happy New Year to each and every one of you. This is the first episode I've been recording on the podcast in the new year, and what an episode it is. It's so great to be back in the studio and to be finally doing the Táin. All roads have been leading to this. We're in the midst of the Ulster cycle. There's no more preamble. This is the meat and two veg of Irish mythology right here. The story of Queen Méabh of Cuchulainn, of the Cattle Raid of Cooley. Over the past few episodes, we've been doing a lot of the I've said preamble already, but like the prologue stories to the Táin, which have included how the Pangs of Ulster came about, how the bulls were begotten, and the background of Cuchulainn and his training and love. All of which is context for what we were about to get to now. So if you haven't listened to those, maybe listen to them beforehand. But also they're more colouring than anything. They're not at all essential, because this is really where this story begins. The Táin is the longest and greatest story of Irish mythology, and it is a novel length story, which I will be obviously doing in a few parts in a few different episodes in a few chapter forms, but I will in no way be able to go into the level of detail of some of my sources, which are Thomas Kinsella's very much generation defining edition of it, which is, and the legacy of Thomas Kinsella is that he is where we call it the Táin from. Before that it was Táin Bo Cúailnge, which is the Cattle Raid of Cooley in Irish, but he was the first one to call it the Táin, and which is what we now have taken into the lexicon and what it is just called now. So that really shows how much of the standard that Thomas Kinsella's edition is, aided in no small part by the fact that Louis Le Brocq, the great Irish artist, did his very famous illustrations, his brush paintings, to illustrate that edition of the Táin. And together they make just a beautiful, beautiful piece of work that I would recommend anyone with any interest in further reading to have a look at this. And also at Kieran Carson, who did a more recent Penguin Classics version of it in about 15 years ago. I think his version came out, which is different and very faithful as well. It's tight, that version as well, which is quite nice. But this is my version that we're doing here. This is the Fireside version, which will be shorter considerably, of course, but it also won't be a Wikipedia synopsis of it. I will try, while trying to be faithful to Kinsella and to Carson and to other versions of the story, I've tried where possible just to have this, tell the story as I would tell it, as clear as water, as Phil Pullman would say. And I'd say let's get right down to it. We'll chat a bit more afterwards. This is part one of the Táin on Fireside. The Táin, Part 1. The Pillow Talk. Remember, Bob, No fear, no envy, no meanness. The words of Liam Clancy to Bob Dylan. It was all pillow talk. The greatest and bloodiest battle ever fought on this island all came from pillow talk. It was Méabh, the fierce warrior queen of Connaught, who lay in bed next to her husband Ailill. They had just finished ravishing each other, and lay in a sweaty stew, when husband playfully said to wife, "You know, you're a lucky woman." "What makes you say that?" replied Méabh. "Well, not only have you a fine husband in appearance and temperament, but with riches greater than the High King himself." "I had riches plenty before I married you," said Méabh. "That High King you mock is my father, Yucky Féileach, and of his 6 daughters I was the fiercest in battle and most giving in grace. As a reward my father gave me the whole province of Connaught to rule, which I did on my own. And many suitors came, and each left without my hand, for what I demanded in a husband was more than any woman had asked before." "And what was that?" asked Ailill. He was simultaneously beginning to regret having started this, but also loved watching Méabh go off on one. "I sought a man with no fear, no envy, and no meanness," said Méabh with a wry smile. "For I am giving and generous, so could not have had a scab for a husband. I am desired by all men, so a jealous man wouldn't have lasted very long. And I am always on the front lines in battle. How would it have looked if my husband was a coward? That is why I love you, Ailill. You were a prince of Leinster. You could look me in the eye, match me in wits and in battle. You have courage, faith, and generosity. Who else could I have married except you?" "So you agree with me then?" asked the satisfied Ailill, "that you are the lucky one?" "I said you were a suitable husband, but I was already queen. I am no kept wife. If anything, you are a kept husband." This stung the Leinsterman. "Kept husband? With 2 kings for brothers, one over Meath, the other over Leinster, and they were only made kings because of the order they were born in. I claimed my kingship in a province that wasn't mine by birth. I had never heard of a woman as a king, so I came here to Connaught, and now that we are united in marriage, our rule is secure." "All that's well and good," said Méabh, "but still, I have greater riches." "Let's find out, shall we?" said Ailill. And so it was that an index was taken of every single possession of Ailill and Méabh's. From the diamond on the smallest ring to the turret of the tallest tower, not one thing was left unaccounted for. The armour of their soldiers, the weight of their livestock, all was ticked off and logged. And when the exhausting task was complete, by truly astonishing circumstances, it turned out that Ailill was richer than Méabh by exactly 1 bull. But it was not just any bull. It was the mighty Finn Bannock, the white-horned. The bull had actually been born of one of Méabh's heifers, but had refused to be the property of a woman and had moved to graze in Ailill's fields. Méabh had her servants scour every corner of every field, but no bull or heifer could match the size and ferocity of Finn Bannock. Méabh felt penniless. This 1 bull more that her husband now could gloat with had made all her riches hollow and worthless. So Méabh sent for her most trusted servant, Macroth. "I don't care what it takes. Find me a bull equal or better than Finn Bannock." "There is only one in all of Éire," said Macroth. "In Ulster, the kingdom of King Concobar MacNassa, in the territory of Cooley, which is under a chieftain named Dara MacFiachna. Dara has a bull I would argue was even greater than Finn Bannock. His name is Dun Cúna, the brown bull of Cooley." "Go seek this bull at once," cried a delighted Méabh. "Tell Dara MacFiachna to loan me this bull for 1 year, after which I will return it with an interest of 50 heifers. And tell him if he delivers it himself, I'll give him a portion of Connaught lands bigger than his entire territory. And finally, tell him that he also may have the friendship of my thighs." And MacRoth rode as hard and fast as he could before reaching the household of Dara MacFiachna in Cooley. The messenger went before the Lord and repeated the Queen's offers. Dara was so delighted, he began to bounce on his throne until he burst the cushion underneath. The Lord invited MacRoth to stay the night for a great feast to celebrate this new partnership between Connaught and Ulster. There had been tension between the two provinces ever since Fergus MacRoch had fallen out with Ulster King Concobar MacNassa over the king's treatment of Deirdre and the sons of Ishnach. Fergus and his devoted followers had left Ulster and were in exile in the kingdom of Ailill and Méabh, Connaught. So Dara MacFiachna's decision to loan one of the jewels of Ulster to the western Connaught men was controversial to say the least. But the chieftain was delighted with this new arrangement. "I will be almost as rich as King Concobar himself," thought Dara. But as the night got late and the wine continued to flow, the gossip began to fly. "God, isn't Dara a great lad?" said one attendant. "One of the greatest in Ulster, maybe second only to Concobar," said another. "Concobar, now there's a great man. No one could take from Concobar what he didn't give willingly." "Yes, it was good of Dara to loan Dun Cúailnge, because it would have taken an army made of all 4 other provinces to take it from Ulster unwillingly." MacRoth happened to overhear this last part. "I beg your pardon?" he asked the drunken attendants. "I'll have you know, Queen Méabh has been outrageously generous in her offer to your lord. But regardless of Dara MacFiachna's answer, Dun Cúailnge would have been taken." As gossip always does, word of this came back around to Dara's ears, and when MacRoth came back the next morning to retrieve the bull, he was refused. "I've changed my mind. You may not have Dun Cúailnge, and only for the taboo of not murdering messengers and guests, you would not leave here alive." "And why is this?" asked MacRoth. "Well, I heard you said that my permission is irrelevant, that one way or the other you would take my precious bull." "Surely the drunken gossip of household staff is not worthy of the ears of a chieftain," said MacRoth. "I believe the words of my people. Now return to your woman, king, and tell her that she may keep the friendship of her own thighs." MacRoth returned to Cruachan, to the kingdom of Queen Méabh, and told her what had happened. "I failed you, my queen." "Never mind that, my loyal friend," reassured Méabh. "You were right in what you said. He could have had riches. He could have had the friendship of my thighs. Now he will feel the wrath of my blade. If I have to burn down all of Ulster, the brown bull of Cooley will be mine." And on Táin Bo Cúailnge began. As for Ailill, even though all of this had stemmed from he and Maev's own quarrel, he did not question Méabh. She had been disrespected by Ulster. Everything else was irrelevant. So he mustered his armies while Méabh mustered hers. Ailill also requested help from his brothers, Corpra in Tara and Finn in Leinster, to send aid. And of course Méabh also had the allegiance of Fergus MacRoch, former king of Ulster, and Concobar MacNessa's own son Cormac, both of whom led an entire host of Ulster exiles with a bloodlust against the current rule of their province. Before too long the armies were assembled, 19 legions of 3,000 each, the warriors of 4 provinces, Connaught, Munster, Leinster and Meath, the largest ever assembled. They all met at Cruachan to plan their invasion of Ulster. This had already become about so much more than a bull. But Queen Méabh was also keen to remind everyone that the bull was what they were there to retrieve. The Druids convinced the bloodthirsty warriors to await a sign from the gods before plunging into the horror of battle. Every day Maeve rode out in her chariot seeking this sign. She looked at the army that was at her command. I will be cursed by all those who are leaving loved ones behind, and cursed forever by those who are being left. Many may never be reunited, all because of loyalty to me, and for the satisfaction of my own pride. As she considered this, before the Queen of Connaught came a small golden chariot pulled by 2 black stallions. At the reins was a beautiful young blonde woman. Her hair tied up, she wore a red cloak with golden clasps, and she was heavily armed. "What is your name?" asked Maeve. "I am Féidim, and I am a poet of Connaught. I have just returned home after studying verse and vision in Alba." "And tell me," continued Maeve, "did you learn foresight while you were there?" "Indeed I did." "Then tell me, what do you see in my future? How will this war end for me?" "In crimson and red," was the reply. "Impossible," scoffed Maeve. "Ulster is weak. Concobar is weak. The birth pang still felt by every man in the province from Macha's curse has decimated their armies. We have a host from 4 provinces. We even have Ulster men fighting with us, Fergus MacRook and Concobar's own exiled son Cormac. It is the greatest army ever assembled. How does it end in blood for us?" "I only tell what I see," said Féidim. "For you, this war ends in crimson and red." Maeve then decided to take a different interpretation of this prophecy. "Well, no army leaves battle unscathed. I'm not so naive to think no Connaught blood will be shed at all, but that does not necessarily mean victory for Ulster. You must see more." So Féidim continued. "I do. I see a young man, the Hound of Ulster. There is no army you can build that will not fall by his sword. He is faster and stronger than 1,000 men fighting as one. He has a weapon never seen before that no one survives, the gay Bulga. In a rage he enters a warp spasm, a form too terrifying and monstrous to even describe. You asked your future, and I tell no lie. Beware Cuchulainn." Maeve was well and truly rattled. But what could she do? The armies had come. The die had been cast, and in the thousands of battles that had been fought in Éire, no one individual had ever defeated an army, not even Lula Vada or the Dagda. Maeve refused to accept the foresight of this young poet. Instead, the Queen of Connaught returned to Cruachan and told the assembled horde, "The gods have spoken. We ride for Ulster." To be continued. And that here we have part 1 of the Táin on Fireside, and I really hope you enjoyed it as much as I had an absolute ball writing, adapting and telling it. This episode was actually a re-record. I recorded this the other day, which is why this is coming out a few days late. We've a new system, we've a new computer system in the studio, and there was just some teething problems in getting it set up, and unfortunately the podcast was recorded into the wrong microphone the other day, so unfortunately was unusable, but so I came in today to re-record it before so that it could get out. So I hope thank you for your patience in waiting for it, and hope it was worth the wait. It was definitely worth me doing it again to get it right, because this is so important, and it's been such a joy to be writing and adapting the Táin at last. It's what the year has been leading up to, and what a way to start 2020 and start a new year of Fireside than with the climax of Irish mythology. There's just so much here straight away. First of all, we're finally meeting Queen Méabh, who I've been waiting to meet since starting this. She is the ultimate. She was one of the greatest characters, full stop, in Irish mythology, and certainly possibly the greatest female character in the pantheon. Because it's worth noting that, and this was an element that I hadn't realised myself even. It's not just that she is this fearsome warrior queen. She is the head of the province of Connaught, which is a role that up to this point no woman had been made. Especially after doing the king cycle, which I really enjoyed doing, and there was some great stories in it. But the fact that it was just king, lad. Whereas here we have Ailill, who is the king of Connaught, but he is Maeve's husband. He is not king over her. It's almost a bit like how the English crown is at the moment, with the Queen being the head of state and Prince Philip not being allowed to be king, because that would imply that he was over her. So you'd almost be tempted to refer to him as Prince Ailill to imply that he wasn't higher. But we couldn't be doing that, because then we'd be modelling Irish mythology after the British crown, and sure, Jesus, wouldn't that collapse in on itself and be a total oxymoron. But Maeve is that quote at the beginning that I did, no fear, no envy, no meanness, that anyone who knows me well, or who saw my one-man musical Cassowary last winter, will know that is my favourite quote of all time, which was said by Liam Clancy of the Clancy Brothers to Bob Dylan in the Gaslight Cafe in the early 1960s. That quote can be heard on No Direction Home, which is the documentary Martin Scorsese made about Bob Dylan. It is absolutely wonderful if you haven't. It's really long. It's about 3.5 hours long, and it's just so much footage of just Dylan talking about himself and other people talking about Dylan. And if you're a Dylan fan, you've almost definitely already seen it. But even if you're just a big music fan and have never really given a Bob Dylan a go, then check it out. It's brilliant. But I would have grown up a huge Bob Dylan fan. He was the first one. He was more than the music. He was the first person that ever made me feel that having curly hair was cool and could be cool, because I am, I've seen pictures of me. I'm very much a curly Sue. But when I got into my 20s, I discovered, I kind of came late to it, to coming home to Irish music. I wouldn't have been hugely into Irish music growing up, but I've become obsessed in the last couple of years, especially since starting to get more into the Irish mythology and the folklore. It has been my own very personal Celtic revival, very much so. And you can imagine my joy to discover that Bob Dylan was incredibly influenced by the Clancy Brothers and was very good friends with them in the 60s and throughout life as well, and modelled, thought that Liam Clancy was the greatest ballad singer of all time. And in No Direction Home, there's an interview with Bob Dylan where he's talking about Liam Clancy, and he said that there was one night that Liam leaned over to him after about 30 pints of Guinness and said, "Remember, Bob, no fear, no envy, no meanness." And I loved that quote so much that I basically built a show around that quote, because I just thought that's really everything, you know. If you could achieve just those three things, that wouldn't be a bad go at life, would it? If you could have courage, if you could not be jealous, if you could be happy in your own life, and if you could not be horrible to other people, if you could not be mean, or you can afford any kind of generosity, I couldn't think of anything else that you'd need. Now, of course, that means that's a great challenge. You'd be striving an entire life to try and emulate that. But I just thought this was profound words plucked by Liam Clancy from somewhere. But imagine my surprise when I was reading Ciarán Carson's adaptation of the Táin for the first time a couple of years ago, only to discover in the first chapter, in the pillow talk between Queen Méabh and King Ailill, that Queen Méabh loves Ailill because he is free, he does not have fear, he does not have envy, and he does not have meanness. I couldn't believe it that that's where it was from. So the idea of the marriage of Irish folk music and Irish mythology cemented this quote as my favourite quote of all time. And I adore it so much and love that is at the crux of Queen Méabh and King Ailill's relationship, that is why she loves him, that is what she demanded in her husband, because that is what she was herself. She needed someone who could match her in those three elements. And the fact that to talk for a moment about, apologies if you're listening to this in a car with smallies, with young children, the sex of the Táin. Lady Gregory, who has been a gospel of mine for all of the folktales and myths up to this point, she was one of the first to adapt the Táin and centred it around Cuchulainn, but her adaptation is not really rated among fans of this material because it is heavily sanitized. It is very much like the version we would have heard in school, that a lot of Irish children would have heard at some stage from a particularly kooky or eccentric teacher at some stage in primary school. When I was adapting this first episode, I had just a flash of a memory. I had forgotten whenabouts it was in school that I first started hearing these stories, and I had a vivid memory of being in second class at the age of 8 and watching a really poorly animated version of the Táin on a TV. It was one of those very primitive animation styles where like it's a still image that just kind of moves from left to right. I remember the images of the bulls in that, and I remember specifically like an image of a bull going down on the ground. So that was obviously where I heard it. But it's not a part of any syllabus or curriculum. It's just a thing that primary school teachers can teach by their own whim, and they can choose to do it or not. And that's why so many Irish people would have a vague knowledge of so much of this material but wouldn't know any kind of detail at all, and was one of the main reasons I wanted to start this podcast. But the sex and violence of this story is something that has been in it since its origins in Old Irish, and since it was told orally throughout the centuries. Like, it was written down, it's thought, for the first time I think about the 12th century, but it's been circulating they think since about the 8th or 9th century, so it's over 1,000 years old, this story. And in those earliest versions, parts of which have survived, the sex and the blood is there, and it starts in a post-sexual place. It starts with pillow talk. That's literally the name of the chapter. Even I've combined the first couple of chapters with this first part. But it starts from pillow talk of this argument between husband and wife, this very pedestrian thing that explodes into the greatest and biggest and bloodiest battle in Irish mythology, and starts. And that's why it's almost, if you were to try and summarise the Táin, it's almost a slightly confusing start in that the quarrel is between husband and wife, and yet the war ends up being with husband and wife and a third party being between Méabh and Ulster. All because she wanted this bull to match her husband, which makes it interesting straight away and unlike anything else I know straight away, but is you can understand how it would be a confusing start to try and explain, and I hope I've been clear as I could be with that, because it becomes Maeve's keen to make sure it's still about just the bull. It's the bull that she wants, but it is about so much more than that, and it is the amalgamation of everything, and like all of the stories that we've been telling up to now, particularly over the last month or two with the prologue stories to the Táin, like of Cuchulainn and of the pangs of Ulster and of how the bulls were begotten. They all are referenced in this first part here. This is what they all lead to. And again, it's not essential that you have had those stories or that you've listened to those, but they just add so much colour and richness to the world, to the extended universe of the Ulster cycle, which just makes, personally, made for a much better writing experience, and I hope is made for a better listening experience. Those of you who are up to date and who have on the podcast and who have listened to all the episodes, I hope that you feel that it is a wider world you're a part of now, that these don't exist. These cycles, the 4 Irish cycles, even though they are all separate, I hope you do feel that they do all occupy the same world and they are referenced together. And I just hope that you are still enjoying that and feel that something's different here, because this story is different. This story has so many more sources and has novel-length sources, which is something that so many incredible Irish stories have been robbed of in not being expanded at all. This one has been expanded and expanded upon, and is why it's the most famous of them all and possibly the greatest of all. So there is so much more detail to it, a lot of detail that I won't be able to do, but I still wanted to. This may be 4, maybe 5 parts, it may be more than that. I would hope that it wouldn't be more than about 4 or 5 episodes to tell my version of this story anyway, which will be shorter obviously than novel length, but I still hope will feel detailed and personal, and that it'll be my clearest version of this story while still paying certain attention to what I feel makes the story unique, such as this pillow talk and of this messenger going to Cooley and this gossip that circulates back around. Like, this is beautiful detailed stuff that is such a joy to experience, and I hope is for you as well. And I hope it was more clear than that previous rant there. But before I head off, I want to just say, in case anyone was wondering, because for a couple of weeks I had been promising a Christmas episode, which people will have noticed that there hasn't been an episode of Fireside for a couple of weeks. There was meant to be a Christmas episode and it was recorded, but as everyone, but Head Stuff took its holidays, its well-deserved holidays, after the incredible 2019 that it had, opening the new studio and everything. And so the studio was on lockdown for the couple of weeks, and the Christmas episode didn't get a chance to be edited. So because of that, by the time it was ready to go, the time had passed, and we felt that there was no point in releasing a Christmas episode in January if it wouldn't be listened to. So it does exist, and who knows, we may be able to re-record or re-release it next Christmas. But that is what happened there. If anyone was looking forward to a Christmas episode, I do apologise there. But we are back with a bang, and we are back and ready to work harder than ever. I'm so excited to see what 2020 brings for Fireside. Of big plans to expand across other platforms, while also hopefully making the podcast bigger and better and the best that it possibly can be. I don't think there's anything else, so I will wrap up there. Next week we will continue the Táin. We will have part 2, where we will have the collected armies of Munster and Connaught and Leinster and Meath finally facing off and meeting Cuchulainn himself. So I hope you'll all enjoy it, and I'll see you all next time, and you'll hear me by the fireside. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
This podcast is part of the Head Stuff Podcast Network.